I would like to tell you guys about one of my favorite childhood memories for Shabbat. On Friday afternoons, we would all run over to my dad, dressed in our Shabbos finest, and he'd reach into his pocket, and he'd take out one of those dad rubber coin purses. And he'd give us each a few coins, and we'd give tzedakah. And every once in a while, the tzedakah box would fill up, and we would get to decide what we would do with the money. And it was special, it was meaningful, and those things about tzedakah were, it was easy. We were doing it every week. We were doing it together. Fast forward 16-ish years, I graduated college. I got this amazing engineering degree. And I thought, I've got this cool salary. I can buy all these things. So I started jumping into these big girl purchases almost as fast as I skimmed through the fine print of my student loans. And at the encouragement of my father, I looked through my finances in October of 2016. And it turned out that in September of 2016, the train was starting to kind of fall off the rails, and I caught it just in time. And over the next year and a half, until about last fall, I spent a lot of time looking at my finances and figuring out how to get them in order. So I did some things that are pretty common for people my age. I got a roommate. I started making payments on my student loans. I stopped eating out. And all of those things were good. I felt like I was starting to go in a direction. But something was missing. And that thing was tzedakah. And I realized after a certain point in my budget that I wasn't giving any tzedakah. I might give to this person's GoFundMe because their house burned down. Who would say no to funding something like that? I know, of course I gave. But I wasn't really giving tzedakah. So recently I've been evaluating how I give both my time and my money. So I'm going to share with everybody some ways that I have learned how to be able to give more of my money. But first I have two disclaimers. The first one is that it is imperative that everybody has an emergency fund, and the size of your emergency fund is appropriate for you. And I don't have time to get into those, but emergency funds exist and you should have one. The second thing is that once you commit your money to ma'aser, which is the 10% of tithing that Jews are obligated to give, you cannot decommit that money. So you should think wisely and carefully before you make those commitments as you are able and under the discretion of you and your rabbi. So what does a budget look like? In my opinion, it's done on a monthly basis. So every month, you close out the budget and you review how you spent your money. The most basic of budgets will have a line for money coming in and a line for money coming out. But yours should be a lot more sophisticated than that. And the categories that you should do will include discretionary spending, which is money you choose how to spend, and non-discretionary spending, which is money that in some way or another you didn't choose where it went to. Those are your student loan payments, your car payments, your rent. Those kinds of things are considered non-discretionary. In my budget, there's 35 different line items, and unfortunately I can't list them all for you here, but I want everyone to understand why it's important to have so many lines. Having different versions of similar things can help you identify where you're not being efficient or where you're not being mindful in your spending. So there's a big difference in having a budget item that says food and it has a $500 expense versus two line items and one that's groceries and eating out, right? So if you've got $500 for food and $200 for groceries and $300 for eating out, it might make you think, I might be eating too much Brooklyn pizza, right? So when you're making your budget, there's two ways that you can build this budget. One of them is called a bottom-up budget. So that's a really good way to start. You say, okay, last month I spent this on my rent, I spent this on my gas, I spent this on my food, I spent this on tzedakah, right? And then next month you try to spend the same amount. And those are really good for people who are currently living within their means and just want guidance and direction. The other way, the way that I do, is called top-down budgeting. And a top-down budget would be one where you say, okay, I am taking home this much money every month, therefore the most amount of money I can spend on rent is, say, $1,000. And you go and you find a place that's appropriate for your budget. And that way is considered a more challenging way because you impose on yourself these restrictions on where you can spend your money and how it can disappear. Most people end up with a combination of the two. So if you start with a bottom-up budget and you see that you're spending, $75 on clothes this month, then in the next month you spend $100, you might want to impose a $75 limit on yourself so that moving forward you stay consistent. But we're not always kind of perfect at this, right? So what we can do is we can take a top-down budget and a bottom-up budget to move in the direction we want to move. But most important, while we're doing our budget, we want to build some wiggle room because life doesn't always go according to plan. So regardless of how much money you have in savings, what you want to do is you want to have room for sometimes when your best intentions don't go the way you want them to. So for example, for me, I go to a lot of concerts, and my concert budget is, let's say it's $50, and I spend $50 on one concert ticket, right? Life happens, it just so happens some amazing band I have to see comes in town tomorrow, and I have to go. Having wiggle room in my budget will allow me to make those choices while still spending within my means and having room to give tzedakah later in the month. And regardless of the way you choose to build your budget, the most important thing to do is to review your finances and to think about how you can do better. So one of the things that I learned when I looked back was I was meeting all of my line items, but then I was also taking out like $100 or $200 a month at the ATM. I wasn't tracking where that was going, so I started making an intention of not going to the ATM, right? I keep an emergency 20 in my wallet. I always have some cash on me, but I don't just pay in cash. I am also able to pay off my credit cards, and that's also extremely important, and unfortunately not the topic of my DENtalks tonight. So while we're doing these forms of optimization, it's important for us, how we give tzedakah is always our choice. But by doing these things, we're able to make sure that when, you get into a car accident, God forbid, or something, you go on vacation, you don't take away from the money you plan on giving to tzedakah, right? Sometimes it's the last thing on our minds, even though it should be the first thing on our minds. So at the end of the day, how you spend your money is definitely your choice, and your choice alone. But having a plan helps you achieve all of your goals and help those in need.